15 American soldiers captured, unarmed, still wearing their uniforms. They did everything by the book. They surrendered the right way. They gave their names, their ranks, their service numbers, exactly what the laws of war required. They followed the rules, every single one of them, and they were shot dead anyway, not in the chaos of battle, not by some rogue soldier acting alone, but because of a cold, deliberate, written order signed by a German general who knew exactly what he was doing, understood it was wrong, and did it anyway. This is the story of Anton Dostler, and it is the story of how justice, real, undeniable, caught-on-camera justice, finally tracked him down. If this name means nothing to you right now, keep watching, because by the end of this video, you will never forget it. Here at My History Profiles, we dig into the stories that most people never get to hear, and this one is going to stay with you. Drop a comment right now and tell us, had you ever heard of Anton Dostler before today? Hit subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Anton Dostler was born in Munich, Germany, in the spring of 1891, into a country that practically worshipped its military. This was Imperial Germany, a place where wearing a uniform made you someone worth respecting. Soldiers weren't just soldiers. They were symbols. They represented discipline, loyalty, and national pride. For young men growing up in that environment, joining the army wasn't just a career choice, it was almost a calling. And Dostler felt that pull deeply. By the time he was 19, he had already signed up. He stepped into military life with both feet and never looked back. But almost immediately, history had other plans for him. Just 4 years after he enlisted, the First World War exploded across Europe and dragged an entire generation of young men into one of the most brutal conflicts the world had ever seen. Dostler lived through all of it: the flooded trenches, the poison gas, the relentless grinding death, a war that chewed men up and spat them out as broken shadows of what they used to be. Germany lost, and the punishment was severe. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated the country. Territory was taken away. The economy was crushed under heavy penalties. And most painfully for men like Dostler, the military was gutted. Germany was only allowed to keep a tiny army of 100,000 men. The proud, powerful force that had defined his entire identity had been reduced to almost nothing. For most officers, that was the end. They left. They moved on. They found something else. But Dostler stayed. He became part of the small, elite group of soldiers allowed to remain in uniform under those restrictions. And he didn't just survive within those limits, he thrived. His superiors saw him as exactly the kind of officer they needed: disciplined, reliable, and completely obedient. He never pushed back. He never asked uncomfortable questions. He did what he was told, and he did it well. That quality, that willingness to simply follow orders without questioning them, seemed like a strength at the time. Later, it would become the centerpiece of one of the most important war crimes trials in history. While Dostler quietly climbed through the ranks, Germany itself was changing in ways that would reshape the entire world. Resentment from the lost war was boiling over. Nationalism was spreading like a fever. And a movement built on rage, grievance, and dangerous ideology was gathering real power. When Adolf Hitler took control of Germany in 1933, the country changed almost overnight. The restrictions placed on the military after the First World War were ignored, bent, and eventually thrown out entirely. Germany began rearming, secretly at first, then openly. And Dostler, already a seasoned career officer, stepped right into the expanding new military machine without a moment of hesitation. He wasn't a fanatic. He didn't stand on stages giving passionate speeches about ideology. He wasn't burning with political conviction. He was simply a professional soldier who did whatever the chain of command asked of him. And in some ways, that made him far more dangerous than a true believer. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939 and the Second World War began, Dostler was already serving in a high-level staff role. From there, the postings kept coming. The Eastern Front, Operation Barbarossa, one of the deadliest military campaigns in all of human history, the frozen nightmare of the Arctic. Division after division, command after command, always performing, always advancing, always trusted. By early 1944, he had been given one of the most strategically important positions in the entire Italian theater, commanding general responsible for defending the Ligurian coastline in northern Italy. It was a position of real authority in a critical region, at a critical moment in the war. And that's exactly where 15 American soldiers were headed, paddling silently through the darkness toward him. The night of March 22, 1944, 15 men, 2 inflatable rubber boats, the black, cold water of the Ligurian Sea. No lights, no talking. Every single movement was deliberate. These men were OSS operatives, members of the Office of Strategic Services, the wartime intelligence and special operations agency that would eventually become the CIA. Their mission had a code name, Operation Ginny 2. The goal was surgical and specific. Get behind German lines. Reach the railway tunnels running between La Spezia and Genoa. Blow them up. Destroy the main supply route feeding German forces across northern Italy, and deal a serious blow to the enemy's ability to move men and equipment through the region. It was dangerous. It was precise. It had a real chance of working. But from the very beginning, things went wrong. In the total darkness, a navigation error pushed the boats more than 10 miles north of where they were supposed to land. When the men came ashore, they were deep behind enemy lines, in completely unfamiliar territory, with no clear idea of exactly where they were. The mission leader made the only practical decision available: find cover, hide during the day, try to re-establish contact with their support boats that night, and reassess from there. They found an empty barn near a small village. They stashed the boats. They buried their explosives. They settled in and waited. The next morning, 2 of the men slipped out quietly to find food. A local farmer helped them without asking questions and without raising the alarm. In wartime, silence was often the only form of kindness left. But later that same day, everything fell apart. An Italian fisherman spotted the hidden rubber boats on the beach. They didn't belong there. He knew it immediately. He went to the authorities. 2 Italian fascist militiamen came to investigate. They searched the area and found the buried explosives. Within hours, the information was moving up the German chain of command. A military patrol was organized. Soldiers surrounded the barn. There was a brief, chaotic exchange of gunfire, but it was over almost before it started. The 15 Americans were massively outnumbered, completely surrounded, with no escape route and no backup coming. All 15 were taken alive, and here is the critical detail, the detail that changes everything about what happened next. Every single one of those men was wearing a proper United States Army uniform. They were not disguised. They were not in civilian clothing. They were not trying to pass themselves off as anything other than what they were, American soldiers on a military mission. Under the Geneva Convention, that uniform was their shield. It meant they were prisoners of war. It meant they had rights. It meant they were protected under international law and could not legally be harmed. That protection was about to be destroyed by the stroke of a pen. The 15 prisoners were taken to a German military headquarters for interrogation. 14 of them held firm with almost remarkable discipline. Name, rank, serial number, nothing more. No information about the mission, the targets, the routes, or any operational details. They had been trained for exactly this situation, and they stuck to the code. One man, under relentless pressure and what was almost certainly coercive interrogation, broke. He revealed the true purpose of the operation: to destroy the railway tunnels between La Spezia and Genoa. The information moved quickly through the ranks until it reached General Anton Dostler. Dostler read the report carefully. 15 captured American soldiers. A commando-style sabotage mission behind German lines. He understood exactly what he was looking at, both strategically and legally. He also knew about a specific standing order that Hitler had issued back in 1942, what was called the Commando Order. Its language could not have been plainer. Any Allied soldiers caught during special operations were to be killed immediately. No trial, no prisoner of war status, no exceptions. But Dostler also knew, because it was impossible not to know, that those 15 men were wearing American uniforms, and the Geneva Convention was equally plain on that point. Uniformed soldiers captured in combat were prisoners of war. Killing them wasn't an act of war, it was murder. He brought the case to his direct superior, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. The answer came back without hesitation: execute them. One of Dostler's own staff officers, a man working inside his own headquarters, looked at that order and refused to endorse it. He put his objection on the record. He warned Dostler directly and clearly that signing this execution order was a war crime, that it violated the Geneva Convention, and that one day the consequences would come back for everyone involved. The warning was explicit. It was written down. It was impossible to miss. Dostler picked up his pen and signed anyway. The commander tasked with physically carrying out the execution reached out to Dostler one more time. He was troubled. He asked for the order to be delayed. He repeated the same argument. These men are in uniform. This will be classified as a war crime. Please reconsider. Dostler's response was immediate and absolute. The order stands. Carry it out now. At dawn on March 26, 1944, the 15 American soldiers were pulled from their cells at a rocky coastal point overlooking the sea. Their hands were bound. Some were blindfolded. They were marched outside without any explanation. No charges, no announcement, no last words recorded for history. A German firing squad was already waiting. The orders were given. The guns were fired. 15 men who had surrendered honorably, worn their uniforms openly, and followed every rule of warfare fell to the ground and did not get up. Their bodies were tossed into a mass grave, covered hastily with dirt and rocks. No names, no markers, no dignity, just erasure. Dostler apparently believed the war would end in German victory, and this moment would disappear into history's silence. He was completely, catastrophically wrong. Germany surrendered in May 1945. The war was over, and the men who had given orders for atrocities suddenly found themselves being hunted rather than protected. Anton Dostler was captured by American forces and taken prisoner. Allied investigators began tearing through German military records, looking for evidence of war crimes. They didn't have to search for long. Right there in the official documentation was Dostler's signature, his own handwriting, his own name, on the order that sent 15 American soldiers to their deaths. There was no ambiguity. There was no escape. The paper trail led directly and unmistakably to him. In October 1945, Anton Dostler stood before a United States military tribunal in Caserta, Italy, the very first German officer to face a formal war crimes trial conducted by the Allied powers after the Second World War. The weight of that moment cannot be overstated. Whatever verdict came out of that courtroom would set the standard for every war crimes proceeding that followed, including the enormous Nuremberg trials still ahead. The charge was clear: the illegal execution of 15 American prisoners of war in direct violation of the Geneva Convention. Dostler's defense was the one everyone expected. He was following orders. He hadn't created the commando order. Hitler had. He was just a link in the chain of command, passing down instructions from above. He presented himself as a soldier doing what soldiers do, obeying. The prosecution dismantled that argument methodically and completely. It didn't matter who had originally written the order. It didn't matter what internal Nazi laws said was permissible. A government's internal rules cannot cancel out international law. The soldiers were in uniform. The Geneva Convention was unambiguous. And Dostler, as a commanding general, had both the power and the legal obligation to refuse that order, and he had been told so in writing by his own subordinate. He had chosen to sign anyway. The tribunal declared something that would echo through decades of international law: no soldier, and certainly no commanding general, could claim it was acceptable to summarily execute prisoners of war, not even under the excuse of following orders from above. The verdict came back, guilty. The sentence, death by firing squad. Dostler requested clemency. The appeal was reviewed and denied. On the morning of December 1st, 1945, in Aversa, Italy, Anton Dostler was taken from his cell. He wore his German uniform, but every medal, every decoration, every badge of rank had been stripped away. He was handcuffed. He said nothing. He walked to the execution site with rigid composure, the posture of a man determined to show nothing. No fear, no remorse, no acknowledgement of what he had done. A military chaplain offered a prayer. Dostler accepted it quietly, head slightly lowered. Then he was bound to a wooden post, legs first, then his torso. A black hood was pulled over his head. 12 American soldiers raised their rifles. The commands were given. The shots echoed across a cold Italian morning. Dostler died instantly. He was loaded onto a stretcher, covered over, and buried in a German military cemetery near Pigo Mazia. No ceremony, no mourners, no tributes recorded by anyone. The first Nazi general executed by the Allied powers. Done. But here is the part of this story that matters most of all. After the war ended, Allied investigators located the mass grave at Punta Bianca. The 15 American soldiers were carefully exhumed. This time it was different. This time they were not thrown into a hole under cover of darkness. This time they received proper military burials. Their names officially documented, their deaths formally recognized, their status as prisoners of war written permanently into the historical record. 15 men who had done everything right, who had obeyed the rules of war even when the enemy refused to, were finally given the honor they had always deserved. And the man who ordered their deaths, he faced the exact same end he had chosen for them, bound, hooded, standing in front of a firing squad with nowhere to go and nothing left to say. Anton Dostler was not executed for being German. He was not executed for fighting in a war. He was executed because he was warned, clearly, directly, and in writing, that what he was about to do was a war crime, and he did it anyway. He chose to pick up that pen. He chose to sign that order. He chose to ignore every warning, every objection, and every rule that stood between him and the deaths of 15 innocent men. The 15 soldiers of Operation Ginny deserved justice. On a quiet December morning in 1945, in a cold open field in southern Italy, justice arrived. Anton Dostler had spent his entire career doing exactly what he was told. In the end, he was executed for it, because some orders should never be followed. And history, as he discovered far too late, always keeps the receipts. Here at My History Profiles, this is exactly the kind of story we live to tell. The ones that shake you, the ones that matter, the ones that prove the past is never really finished with us. If this story hit you somewhere deep, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss what we uncover next. Leave a comment below. We read every single one. And stay close, because the next story we have for you, it just might be even harder to believe than this one.